To cut a long story short, is that my dad was dating this woman for a year before my mom found out. My parents split, and he got teenage girl crappy with everyone when we didn't immediately accept the girlfriend and treat her like one of the family. I'm gonna call her the replacement, because that's what she wants to be, and convinced my dad that she should be. She is a terrible narcissist who wants everyone to fall down telling her how amazing she is. I've been trying to find out what each of my parents' legal stuff is like, power of attorney, etc. Because they're reaching retirement and redid it all in the divorce. I see my dad rarely, but we were together at a family event. He does not leave this woman's side because she's convinced him that my siblings and I are mean to her and she needs him to protect her. I roll, whatever B. So I take the opportunity to ask him briefly what his plans are and remind him that the running joke in our family is that it's gonna be me taking care of him when he's old. Relevant backstory. My siblings and dad are terrible in their own ways, and when dad had a medical emergency, I was the one to handle it. Because the replacement was at work, he would have gotten her to deal with it and told none of us. He was lucid the whole time, and so I didn't intervene in his care, because he was perfectly capable of making his wishes known. I didn't call my siblings because, again, what could they do that I wasn't doing? They have little kids, were far away, wouldn't be able to take off work as easily, and he could have called them at any point if he wished. Edit. I feel compelled to point out that this wasn't a life-threatening illness or emergency. It was an acute but not dramatic flare of an existing condition. He shoved it off to me to call them. My siblings were hateful. We didn't speak for months. They still hold it against me. Regular dysfunction. More relevantly, I didn't call the replacement. Not my job. And also, I don't want to talk to her. Ever. The replacement showed up at the hospital and was mad that I was there in the first place. Because she is a nurse and she can handle it. And we're at the wrong hospital. And you can go now, he does not need you. And I would have left work for this. Why didn't you call me? Yet also, what kind of BS ridiculous job do you have that you are not essential and can just miss work? Me. I'm a teacher, by the way, and she knew that. But okay, fine. Totally my fault that I didn't figure out how to wrestle my dad's phone away from him, guess the unlock code, and call you when he could have whenever he wanted. Probably sometime after he called his own children. I still don't know when he talked to her to tell her. Long walk for a short drink of water, huh? Anyway, I barely start this conversation and she butts in and goes, I'll be the one taking care of him. I'm the woman in his life. He doesn't need you or anybody else. You had a chance and failed anyway. B, nobody asked you. She kept this up for 5 minutes. Finally, I just walked away. She glared at me all night and wouldn't let my dad speak to me again. She also managed to piss off my little sister by telling her that my dad isn't a bank. She needed his help moving. Mind your own damn business. And wore the same shirt as one of my older sisters, which was hilarious because I am a bad person. F off the replacement. Nobody likes you. He's never going to marry you, so give it up. I'm the woman in his life. He doesn't need you or anybody else. You had a chance and failed anyway. I don't know what she's trying to say here, but this sounds very much like the sort of thing one would say to his ex, not to his daughter. The fact that she's around doesn't mean that you failed to be the woman in his life. He likely has S with her, and that wasn't a spot in his life for which you were competing, so she didn't win over you by virtue of him being in a relationship with her. In writing up the story of wedding planning around the replacement, I realize it might be better served to go through some of the dynamics at play. On paper, the wedding story looks really unimpressive, but my mindset at the time. On and off since the divorce, I've lived with my dad, and so have a couple of my siblings. The replacement has not, ever. I don't think he will ever give up having his own place. This has caused the replacement no end of drama. We are taking advantage of my dad. I am a deadbeat and I need to get a job. We are a burden on him. The only reason he hasn't sold the house and moved in with her is because of us. I need to pay rent, and I'm a leech, and so on. I could defend myself, but you are all on my side anyway. Suffice it to say that I was always in school or working when I lived there. He didn't ask me to pay rent and refused when I offered, and I did all of the cleaning and grocery shopping and other house chores, and so did my siblings when they were there. Her house, on the other hand, the replacement has 3 kids, I think. At least one was a teenage parent. I don't judge, but the replacement sure does. Her kid and grandkids are staying at her house, rent-free. She's being a good, kind mother and grandmother, and my dad needs to help her son learn to parent and help him shop for an engagement ring for his girlfriend and not say anything when son is in violent screaming matches with his girlfriend or the replacement and not insult him to her. I live with my dad while completing my student teaching. I'm a ducking waste who is never going to get a job and live with him forever. I am a drain. I don't deserve time or attention because I'll never get my life figured out. My then dear fiance lives with us while we save money for the wedding, and he preps for grad school. We're entitled. We are using Dad. He needs to kick us out and get his house back. The living there thing was only one car of the hate train. Anytime he talks about any of us kids, she has something to say. If Dad is being positive, she has to shove everything bad she knew about, and a lot of times stuff she made up, at him so that he wouldn't be positive about us anymore. If it is negative, she feeds it to the point that it creates conflicts that leave us not speaking to him for lengths of time, and she wins. Dad has had to fight her that his kids aren't worthless. It's hard to watch. In the very occasional times we are in the same room, she will bring up the thing that Dad was proud of and try to find a way to make it embarrassing. The thing of it is, none of these conversations ever happen in person. Dad's operating mode is to have these arguments on speakerphone at the top of his lungs, and hers. Sometimes at 4 in the morning on a Wednesday, because that is when she stops giving him the silent treatment and calls him. They argue and scream and are terribly cruel to each other. Then he'll hang up the phone, and she will start calling back until he answers. Once, she called back for 2 hours, during which time Dad and I tried to go out for dinner. Awkward. But he always answers eventually. It's like he can't help it. It is upsetting, both because of what I overhear and that I have no recourse to do anything about it. But I also want my dad to be happy, because he's my dad, you know? So a lot of the crap I experienced secondhand with no way to do anything or process it, because I tried to pretend I wasn't there when these fights were happening and didn't hear anything. I don't want to use the word traumatic because it seems like not a big deal compared to other types and definitions of trauma, but it definitely still bugs me. I was afraid of her ever turning up in person because of the tenuous relationship with my dad, and the unknown of would or wouldn't she say this crap to my face in public, and because she only did say anything a few times, I could never be sure. I was engaged on a Saturday. My now dear husband involved my parents and a few others in a surprise, fairly involved process. They knew ahead of time about it. It was awesome. The replacement started this process pissy because my mom was involved in something with my dad. Mom and Dad suggest that we go to dinner to celebrate. The replacement has an emergency. She does this frequently, of course, including the one time she got lost in her regular grocery store and cried on the phone for 40 minutes until Dad went to get her. I'm honestly surprised her emergency didn't happen earlier to make him miss it. The replacement's emergency kept my dad until he was a little late to dinner, but he made it, and thankfully he was alone. Dad is aware of how we feel about the replacement, and by this time, he had accepted it and doesn't totally understand or like it, but he has stopped bringing her around for things that weren't large family get-togethers. Dad spent a good chunk of dinner pissed off because, of course, the replacement picked a fight, so he would be cranky during dinner. She is texting him constantly, "There's another emergency," and he excuses himself to the lobby twice to answer the phone, so she stops calling him. So, thanks for that, the replacement. You might as well have been there. I have always wanted a wedding on the beach. We started planning a wedding on the beach. It was 100% guaranteed that if the wedding was a destination anywhere, the replacement would be accompanying my dad. My small, intimate 12-person wedding would be nearly 10% the replacement, and that would be hard to avoid. I mean, she didn't even let us have dinner peacefully. Dear husband didn't want to elope without his parents, and I for sure didn't want to exclude my mom if dear husband's parents were coming. But if Dad came, so would the replacement. So, thanks for that, the replacement. The wedding I wanted couldn't happen because your dumb butt would come duck it up. So, we decided to have the wedding in a city about equal distance to our families. It was a pretty good substitute. However, Dad has offered to foot a lot of the bill for the wedding, so I need to run all the plans by him since he's paying. I asked him just once if he could come to the wedding stag. He reacted surprisingly well to me asking, for him, but he made it very clear that it was rude and would not be obliging. He didn't exactly hold the money over my head when making decisions, But I was very aware that it was his personality to agree to something and then when he got pissed off, decide that he wasn't going to do it after all. In addition to this, at least once a week, the replacement redirected whatever fight they were having to how my dad was spending so much money on a wedding. There were plenty of other things he could spend the money on, like the vacation she wanted to take to X, Y, and Z, and how I'm a freeloader, wash, rinse, repeat. Dad contributed to other siblings' weddings. He offered to help, so shut up, the replacement. Seriously, guys, the things she's threatened to do at the wedding, the things she said she would demand to be included in, the decisions she wanted to be involved in making, constantly. I have a pavilion response to my dad's ringtone now. Things the replacement said or did. She bought a dress for the wedding. Guess what color it was? When my dad said she couldn't wear it, she had a meltdown about how she A. already bought it, B. it looked good on her, C. not wearing white to a wedding is a stupid rule, D. well, when was it going to be her turn to wear a white dress? She should get to go first. E. I wouldn't care. F. She needs to look better than my mom. Never gonna happen, babe. She wanted her kids invited. Remember how she never introduced me to them? The photographer was to take formal portraits of her and Dad, her and her kids, just her kids, and all of them together. The photographer will be there anyway. It's not like your daughter is pretty enough to need all those pictures. B. I looked beautiful. She didn't want my dad to stay in the same hotel as my mom, even though that was also our ready area and there wasn't really anywhere else to stay on a busy weekend anyway. Dad was to see me to walk me down the aisle and not at all before, because it was rude to leave her side where everyone was hostile. One of my religion's wedding traditions is to have the parents of the new spouses stand up with the couple and symbolically be part of the ceremony. When my sibling vetoed the replacement standing up there with us, before Dad even asked me about it, the replacement tried to tell my dad he had to sit with her instead, and she was to get a reserved seat of honor. She was to be escorted down the aisle after my mother, because I'm more important to your dad, aren't I? Every time my dad said no, or that won't work, or that isn't how they want it, she replied, well, then what are you spending your money for if she won't do things that you want? And forced Dad to justify wanting to help us out. She wanted to make a speech at the rehearsal dinner. She had opinions about how we did the rehearsal dinner. She wanted to be specially recognized at the anniversary dance. Married couples dance are eliminated by how many years married until one remains. By dancing in it and also remaining on the floor as everyone else was eliminated because you're her dad. You can do whatever you want. She was upset there wasn't a Catholic priest there and that there would be no communion because my dad's and her religion needed to be represented. You can't even take communion anymore, you divorced, cheating a-hole. She didn't like the food choices. She wanted a different meal made special. Among other things, she explicitly threatened to ruin if she didn't get all of her above demands met. She threatened to cause a scene about everything. She threatened to faint on purpose in the middle of the ceremony so my dad would have to pay attention to her. Take my mom's corsage. And she threatened to spill wine on my dress if I was mean to her. And on and on. Dad didn't tell me about any of this, but it's not like I didn't hear it happening. Dear husband was doing research abroad for the few months leading up to the wedding. It was torture. I kid you not, she had a meal and a place card and everything. I arranged my tables to try to make Dad, read the replacement, satisfied. I gave a photo of her to my wonderful photographer, who promised to actively not take photos of her in them, and then accidentally delete the ones she did end up in. And if my dad forced a family photo with the replacement in it, she would charge my dad for the print and not even show me the proof. I had 3 people on the replacement duty. Dad hinted around the fact that they had broken up a week before the wedding. Not uncommon. Then, a couple of days before, the phone calls started back up, so I assumed unbroken. I steeled myself to have absent, disinterested, a-hole dad at my wedding. My dad gave me the best wedding present of all. He came alone. He finally told her to shove it. He was allowed to do whatever he wanted for me at my wedding, and that on that day and a half, what I wanted would come first. He would not be responding to any emergencies, whether she came or not. She was to leave me alone unless I approached her first. She was to get no special attention, because this was my wedding. He was celebrating with me and enjoying his family and the open bar at the reception. He was staying the whole time. She decided at the last minute that those weren't agreeable terms, and she refused to come. I got happy. Present participatory dad was a wedding gift. Edit. There was always a chance she was going to show and make a scene. I honestly don't know what would have happened had she shown, but I'm pretty sure dear husband and his cousins would have thrown her body out of the building. She hasn't congratulated me on my marriage, and she's seen me enough that she's had opportunities. The CBF, when she saw my dad's gift of photos from the wedding, was felt on the International Space Station and changed the tides. She tried everything she could think of to ruin my wedding planning and wedding. She just failed abjectly at getting her way, and then when my dad laid down the law, she pouted and gave me everything I wanted. I really hope her foolishness stays with him a while. He's clearly not that into her, with the whole not living with her and probably never going to marry her. Because if there's one thing a man totally wants to sign up for, it is being pushed into playing dad to a teen mother in a crappy relationship. I don't know why he's still going along with this. Oh well, if she's still around in a year, he'll get a nice reminder on your anniversary of that time she was a complete jerk. I cannot believe this crap. She threatened to douse you with wine on your wedding day? This woman is a lunatic. Hopefully, your dad will figure that out soon and break up with her.